Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm on today with Peter and
Hi, everyone.
the. We're going to talk about the notes that I wrote for A Bit of Orange, and I hope my internet does not cut out too bad. We'll see. We shall see how it goes. So I was supposed to have a discussion with A Bit of Orange recently, but he got sick right before the discussion, and so it ended up not happening. I ended up talking to Matt Powell, and some of you probably saw that. It was interesting. And he says he'd like to talk to me again. So hey, why not? Uh, Mr. Atheist and a gang. Well, we seem to be streaming at the same time as someone else.
Yeah,
Unfortunate.
yeah. A lot of people are live at the moment. I already noticed.
Well,
So
I was
we're
oblivious
going
to
to
this
have a
fact. I
competition.
apologize.
Yeah,
To
we're going to have
all the other
competition.
streamers. Um, but anyways, so yes, so I wrote a whole bunch of notes about Orange, and then I didn't get to use them because he got sick, and so we never talked. Um, and interestingly, he hasn't put out any material in like a month, which is very strange for him because if you look at his stuff, he puts material out very often, but hasn't done it recently. I don't know if that's because he's sick, or I mean, if that is
I
also due
I
to his
don't
sickness.
I don't know. I've watched a lot of him, and it's basically just rehashing Kent Hovind and uh, adding some pretty pictures. So it's
Yeah,
not that he has anything new to present, as far as I've seen, at least.
yeah. It was it's very interesting listening to his videos because he doesn't. Well, it seems he doesn't even really follow Kent Hovind to an extent. He's kind of, well, he reads even less than Hovind does, I guess you could say, because he presents so few examples to back up his points. Could probably count all the examples he uses on one hand, and I can only think of one off the top of my head for his explanation of the mechanisms of evolution. He only used one example, which was the peppered moth example, and he screwed that up horribly. Uh, Hello,
Yeah,
Beach. Hello, Piggle. Hello, all. Um, yeah, he screwed it up horribly. He had absolutely no idea what he was talking about, and that was one of the notes I wrote down. Uh, because what he wanted to talk about was three things: the definitions of evolution, because he's convinced all the definitions except the one he made up are terrible. Uh, the mechanisms of evolution, and the the third one was the evolutionary history of life on Earth. And so uh, for example, for the peppered moth example, he said that the because there was the industrial revolution, and so the trees became very dark, and so the black peppered moths survived better than the white peppered moths. He made the argument, why should any white peppered moths have existed at all? Why should any of them have survived? Because he didn't,
yeah.
you
And
know.
I've seen a couple of people tackle the peppered moth, and what surprises me is that they actually make a case for evolution while arguing that it doesn't happen, because they will state that it's a form of natural selection, but it can be evolution.
Right,
Although natural selection is part of evolution,
right.
and they don't seem to grasp that. They need to have uh, to separate the both of them, and that's what I don't get, because um, if you would make a case for that, at least then say, well, the lighter ones still survived because they did, obviously, because they're still here.
Hmm.
So they always get that one wrong. They always
Yeah.
end up arguing for evolution instead of against.
Right. Yeah. Pickle, you're right. It's still just a moth. Right. I always hear that one. It's so funny because that 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 excuse kind of goes. They just keep expanding that excuse. Like, oh, it's still just a moth. Well, if it changes species, oh, it's still, just an insect. It just gets larger and larger and larger. And even if you can convince them that there are transitions among different groups of insects, oh well, it's still in the insect kind or whatever, the arthropod kind. And
Yeah,
so,
I recently found a question that I can follow up with, because I then just ask, how many generations would it take for your ancestors to no longer be your ancestors?
mhm,
Because everything that comes from a moth is still a moth. It will always still be a moth,
right,
even though it's a completely different species. If it stops having wings, it's still a moth.
right, right. Yeah, they really don't understand the concept of nested clades, uh,
Yeah,
which is why they always ask things like, why hasn't a dog become a cat, or why don't monkeys give birth to humans, or anything like that, because these things are nested within their own separate clades, and they will never cross. They can't cross.
yeah, no,
That's not how evolution works. And so, oh well. But yeah, it was really interesting because I think Jonathan Wells, intelligent design advocate, was arguing against the peppered moth example. I know Hovind argued against it too, but for different reasons. Uh, I mean, he just added a whole lot of stupid to it. but they originally, creationists were trying to say it wasn't an argument for natural selection. Now they're saying, oh, it doesn't
Sure, I
matter
got my bloody
because
camera on.
natural selection isn't evolution. Hey, RJ.
look who's here.
Yeah, yeah. I
RJ.
wandered around here. My camera's gotten jostled when I cleaned my computer screen, and now it's not settled. Bad dog. Bad dog. Okay, that's better. There we go. Busy day.
Busy day, yes. And you're gonna have a busy night, RJ.
Yeah, well, I've been jousting. Well, C, of course, has shown up again on the YouTube, and so I was responding to him, and there's a nincompoop, radical Republican who, I don't know if you're aware of First Things, the conservative religious journal.
I've never heard of it. No.
Well, it's one that I know of for quite some time. It's a kind of conservative, largely Roman Catholic-y, Protestant, conservatives, Jewish-ish, defender of God, and they go way back. They've been out for decades, and an awful lot of the figures that would be in the intelligent design movement crop up at First Things. Anyway, there was a thing that were lambasting atheists, because I get a little side blurb. I follow the First Things on Google Chrome, and so it puts up alerts on things, and I thought, oh, they're attacking atheists. Okay. And it was a really slim thing that atheists are just terrible people, and they don't even know what they think, and they're
Of
fading
course.
away, and we don't have to worry about them anymore. Anyway, this one nincompoop happened to be bringing up evolution, and so I started commenting on him, and I've been jousting back and forth with him, and I won't let him have the last word. And I've been probing to find out what sources he's using and all that, and apparently he's read some Michael Behe and some Philip Johnson and some Michael Denton, and doesn't want to discuss details, but still claims there's like millions of data points supporting intelligent design, and it's true, but Michael Behe isn't really provable, and he's just a mess.
That does sound interesting. Yeah, we were
Yeah.
actually
Oh,
just
yeah. It's hilarious. So that pops up, and he keeps on responding to me, and I keep responding to him, and I make the point of as much as possible to link to technical citations when he doesn't, and he's just claimed that in another thread, supposedly he was discussing the reptile mammal transition with a PhD, and he was arguing, not the PhD but him, that there was a paper that discounted and refuted the gradual transition of the jaw. And I'm asking him, gee, I wish you would cite that so we all can read in class, because the only one I could think of would be Woodmarapp's paper. It ain't going to be anything in the regular science work. And the only one that he could have found that would be a semi-substantive technical work on this is Woodmore app. So I'm quizzing him to find out whether he can come clean and tell us what sources that he's using. And so I was, he brought up the hypothalamus. And so I was looking up and I was finding out some new material on that, but I'm going to have to do that later on after the networking, because that clogs up my computer to do searching around on that. There's a scientist involved that's done a lot of pivotal work there that I didn't have much of in my bibliography. And so, yeah, it's this Bruce person that.
Well, RJ.
Yeah.
It's funny you brought up the intelligent design guys, because I just mentioned Jonathan Wells in relation to the peppered moth experiment.
Oh yeah. And I'm so is this guy channeling intelligent design mainly, or young Earth creationism?
This is a bit of orange, and so what's interesting about him is I really don't know what he's channeling.
He may not know.
He doesn't.
He may be a smorgasborder.
I think that is the case because he doesn't cite literally anything.
Yeah, that's often the case of the ones that float around online. They see stuff and then they repeat it, but they don't really follow a party line.
Yeah, he doesn't cite anything. He doesn't cite people or examples really for anything, so I can't even identify. He doesn't bring up like anything regarding the expanding sun argument or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I have no idea
it would be diagnostic. Yeah. So he brought up the peppered moth like it was really an important problem.
Well, yes. So he has a series titled "Defining Evolution," where he goes through the definitions of evolution, all of which he's convinced aren't good, and the mechanisms of evolution. And he gets to natural selection, and he's talking about the peppered moth experiment, and he's criticizing it because he says, "Why didn't the peppered moth or the white ones go extinct during the Industrial Revolution? Why did any of them survive?" Right.
Apparently, differential predation that's not 100% perfect has not entered his brain pan.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so it's one of those things where I heard him make this argument, and it's so bizarre. Because
did you try bringing up Charis?
Oh, I haven't spoken to him.
Ah, okay.
This was the guy I was originally supposed to speak to, and then Matt Powell was the last minute addition, and so I ended up speaking to him.
Good old Matt. Oh, I hope somebody could arrange for a chat between him and me sometime.
Oh, RJ, I'm sure we would enjoy doing that. He actually, he made a video just a few days, or I think that was yesterday, where this video was like how paleontology disproves evolution, but he spelled paleontology P-A-L-I-E-N.
Yeah, Peter, what did you think of? Have you had a chance to gestate about my criticism of Kent Hovind on my last Evolution Hour?
I saw pretty much most of it. I didn't catch everything because I had to go at some point, but I did catch most of it. Did Hovind reply to you?
Oh gosh, no. No, I've mentioned to him a couple times. He's remained mum on the subject. And he's put up a couple other videos and stuff. He said, "Oh, is your staff just as bad on that one as they were on this fake Opteryx thing?" And I put the link to my video on it.
Yeah,
I haven't heard back from him on it. He hasn't blocked me though, so that's just something.
Yeah, I saw you tackle him on Twitter as well, but I'm pretty sure
I make it known. I'd love to have an enfilade. Anybody that sees me do that, please come in as an enfilade, because that's the whole point of having that. Is now we could be talking about him, and he's linked in, which means everybody that follows him is going to see that in their mentions feed, and therefore we're visible in a way that is independent of whether he says anything.
But the problem is he's not running the account, James. Steve is. Oh,
it doesn't matter, but there's people associated with him. So you have to remember the purpose of this. It's not to persuade Hovind, and even if Hovind doesn't reply, that there are still all the people following that account that are going to be exposed to a contrary opinion by the very fact that we're going at it. And instead of one person like me just saying, "Hey, you're an idiot," you have a discussion between two people explaining why he's an idiot. And that's what Jackson knows, that enfilades can be nice.
Indeed, they can.
Yeah, and it's easy to do. And you don't, in fact, you don't want to have a lot of people involved in the enfilade. At best, maybe 3 at best. But you want to be able to have, so you can have a conversation where you're now side chatting about the data, and they're a captive audience that is connected up. And then maybe some of them, you'll get some people popping in on the opposite side that will attempt to dispute. Now you have yet more grist for the enfilade mill, and then you proceed to display the method and the evidence in front of it. So you got to understand, Peter, there is a method to what I'm doing.
You know, RJ, I did see somebody post, one of the Hovindistas posted that they're getting tired of listening to you, RJ.
Oh,
Did you see that
really?
guy?
Oh, I think they're going to get way more tired of hearing me.
Oh, they yeah, 'cause I saw that and I said translation, we're tired of being shown we don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, because if you would think that anybody that would be able to go at me, and C has been trying on the things, if you've been spotting his little comments back and forth, fine and dandy, have at it. But that it's way easier. That's why when you look at a lot of the Twitter conversations, and this is what I've been trying to wean people off of, is the philosophy down approach works to their advantage. Oh, they have no problem working with philosophy down. They're happy as clams to discuss God or matter. But source methods up, they can't deal with it. So shouldn't we be doing that more?
Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share with you guys, because one of Orange's favorite arguments was that there are no good definitions of evolution, whether changing allele frequencies in a population or pretty much anything, any definition anyone is given to him.
How does he justify that?
Well, for one thing, he makes a series of arguments. One is that losing structures, and this is one of the popular tropes, losing structures is not evolution. And so if you say something,
and does he offer examples of the losing structures?
I don't think so. I don't believe he offered any examples in that area. But
yeah, because they're a side issue at best, although there are some features of where turning off a system, which they would just think of as degeneration, and therefore I bear that in mind, that they could think of it as existing information that gets turned off, but it still produces novelty. One of the reasons why I can eat my nice green salad is because I have the mutant version of the I hate broccoli gene that shuts it off.
Right.
Oh, I've got a C has just suddenly slipped in there. See, C mistakes source citations. He has the book, and he's counted up that the guy has cited 302 sources, not 160. He treats individual citations as separate sources, even though they're citing the same thing over and over again. But I'm keeping detailed count. He's only cited 161 or 2. I'd have to look at my spreadsheet so far. He cited some multiply. So the fact that no, if you cite one source 50 times, it's not 50 different sources. It's just the same one source 50 times. And so I'm making a note of all of that, and that's why I can tell that from the bibliography. I also don't want to let him have the last word on anything. That and to the best of my ability, I want to use it as an opportunity to inform the outside observer. I'm not there to, I don't want to persuade him. He's unpersuadable. But I may put a little seed in or make a reference where people would go, oh, that's kind of interesting. I think I'll start looking that up. And therefore, it'll have a practical utility. So is still no particular date set, Peter, yet for my interaction with Mr. Hovind?
I haven't had time this week. I'm just completely swamped. I called him a couple of times and he wasn't available. He was doing something
research.
I don't know, but he couldn't come to the phone. He has
a phone guy.
Yeah. You need to call him. That's just the way things work best. If you call him, then at least you'll get him.
Pardon me if I do not hold my breath for the Hovind debate to materialize.
Yeah, he already agreed to it.
Oh, that means nothing. That means nothing. But the thing is that what everybody can do is prod him a little to say, hey, when are you going to be debating Downard? I hear you're supposed to be having a discussion with him. Yeah, really looking forward to that. Stoke the fire a bit. That's what the crowd should be doing.
Well, he seemed very eager to talk to several people.
He's always eager. He's a talker.
Yeah.
He would call me, and Hovindistas often will reach out and do that as part of the evangelical kit bag. He wants to defend the thing until he maybe discovers that it's not a good idea to try to defend the arguments that he does, which you'll find out, hopefully, if he ever actually interacts. But he's always upbeat. He's always ebullient. He's always gung-ho. That's Hovind. He's been that way for decades.
I mean, except for right after his discussion with Aaron Ra. After that, he seemed a little bit upset by things, a little bit touchy.
Well, and
but
fuddly,
I have
had this discussion with
James.
James,
James, I have to interject because so far, Hovind always has been honest with me when he wants to do something or not. Because when it comes to Aaron Ra, he didn't say no, but he wants it to be a debate format, and I told him that's
where
not
he has more of a control over content. Yeah. And I can easily see where Aaron Ra has more important things to do, like hitting his head with a ball peen hammer, than having another discussion with Dean Hovind.
Yeah, but he has been urging me that shouldn't keep me from setting up the rest, and I'm using the rest a little bit as leverage. Get him to talk to Aaron Ra again, but he's eager to talk to all the others. That's
I'll just say whatever format he wants to go with, I'm perfectly happy with. I'll adapt.
I'm not, because if we give him a debate format, he'll just gish gallop and we'll end up.
I know.
Nowhere.
That's why you're the moderator. But at any rate, I am adaptable to all formats.
Yeah, but. Yeah, I already told him debate format is not going to happen on my channel. I'll set up talks with him.
Yeah, have a chat.
But it's
I'll even
not
let
going
him have most of the time because I can be concise.
Yeah.
Well.
So.
I can be verbose too, but I try to hit.
I'm now at a point where I'm thinking that maybe I should set up a few of the talks to let him see that he can at least trust the people who are setting up the talk and trust the people that I'm presenting. And if I can gain that trust, maybe he'll accept talking to Aaron Ra again, because Aaron has already agreed. He said, if you can set it up, I'll be there. So that's not going to be a problem. So we'll see what happens.
In other news,
yes.
In other news, your notes. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
I said in other news.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
I can hear you.
Can you hear us?
Hello. Can the chat hear me?
I can hear everybody, and yet can you hear me? I can hear Peter, and I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I always worried about my internet because it sucks here.
It's still fine.
Okay.
I just derailed everything by going back to what we started out with, your notes.
Oh, so okay, good. Right. So the notes. So his other one of his other major tropes was that Orange thinks mutations are so improbable as to be basically impossible, or positively or beneficial mutations that are beneficial to the host are basically impossible. They're so improbable that they really couldn't happen. Right. And he again had no citation for it, had no examples of it. He made a kind of vague sort of mathematical argument, but it really
most of the areas where really deleterious mutations come in, and this is one of the reasons why people reading old evolutionary material dating back, to the 80s and 90s is kind of behind the curve on stuff. It's clear that deleterious mutations tend to be in spots that are if they're in a protein, it's that they're affecting protein folding. That's a bad place to have a mutation. Any of the codon mutations where you have synonymous things that isn't changing the way the protein folds, yeah, it's not a problem. In other areas, you can have things that are mutations that change the regulation of the gene. It's not necessarily deleterious. It may just change a little bit more or a little bit less of the thing. And that can be thought of as a neutral mutation until you start seeing it farther down the road. So again, they would have to deal with specific examples. And if the guy pays no attention to primary sources at all, then you're not going to be able to get down to specific examples of it. I love collecting stuff that's relating to primary source point mutations. An awful lot of complex features involve a suite of point mutations over time. But when you can find something where, like that bird beak thing, where it was just 2 genes involved and relatively simple point mutations to alter that, that's really significant as to the kind of dynamic range that you can get in an ancestral organism.
Right. Yeah, but he does not deal at the level of specific examples.
Right. Which goes back to rule number 3, map of time. He doesn't have a map of time in his head. And so some of your interactions with him would want to point that out, to draw him out, not what you think happened, not what you know the science to be. You'll want to get to that, deploying that appropriately. But you want to tease the person out as to what they think happened. And most of the time, you're going to get a fog bank because they don't actually work out what they think happened. They're
Would you say they get
negative?
RJ, would you say they get a Phineas Fogg bank?
Yeah. Oh, I make use of the pun about fog in the thing. I've delighted, and all of his pseudonyms that I'm going to come up for him are various language variations on fog, nabel, and various things from various languages. So he plays around with that. But and I think that's part of the reason why Verne chose that name for him. He's Mr. Fogg. He's a fog. Nobody knows anything about him. He's a wisp.
Mm-hmm.
He tends to, like Mr. Fix, the detective. He tends to often give people direct names like that to draw off of. Because remember, English is not his first language. He's writing in French, so he's playing around with stuff. Nemo, no one, all of that. Rober, oak. So he just coins up stuff like that. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, the fact that little Matt shut the thing down is revealing. That I think is important.
That shut what down?
The comments section on that video. That was diagnostic. I never shut the comments down on any of my videos. Oh, I want them to come in, and it's going to be there forever.
Yeah, it was very funny because it was on the Paleontology one, and so I was actually, all I did was I started out by saying, hey, if you want to speak again, you can contact me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. I'm all over the place. I'm not hard to reach. I was talking to a few people and they were saying that like next time we have a discussion, I should endeavor to structure it a bit more. And I agree. I was kind of pushed into places like some kind of space topics, and I don't know a whole lot about space.
You gave him way too much rope.
Right. And so I should definitely structure it more. And so I came back a little bit later, and actually I've been alerted by somebody told me on Twitter, because I posted a picture of the title saying Paleontology, because I just couldn't get enough of that title.
Paleontology. It's always a good giveaway. Sometimes it can just be a legitimate typo. I mean, I and O is next to each other. I mistype the stuff. My fingers can fumble up, and so I'm always charitable on typographical stuff, but the substance matter, that's a different kettle of fish, and source methods will demonstrate where they're coming from on that level. And if somebody is as vague as all get out, everybody wants to show off. And if you have your stuff, you want to show it off, you're going to come in guns blazing. If you have read the book and you know the material and you have the material, who would not want to use the ammo? So the absence of that is a measurement right off the bat of how wispy vague their conception is, that they don't know names, they don't know subject matter, and a few methods questions can probe around on that. If they mention a particular topic and you know the background of where the topic comes from, that's when you can feel confident. If somebody brings up irreducible complexity, well, that's Michael Behe, thank you. So then you can say, oh, have you read much of Behe's works? And see whether or not you get deer in the headlight or not.
Oh,
and if
yeah,
you've read Behe's works, you're ahead of them on it.
That's basically what happened. Well, he didn't go deer in the headlights mode, unfortunately, so I didn't get that glorious moment, RJ. But I did ask him because he was very interested in talking about dinosaur soft tissue, of which I've done two separate. Well, I've addressed that topic in two separate videos. One where I actually went through the arguments and showed how it doesn't at all indicate young Earth creationism, and another video looking at Mark Armitage because he basically tried using it to further young Earth creationism.
And the
so,
institution that he was working for was not entirely pleased at all of this unpleasant publicity.
Right, and yeah, I think someone said something to him, and that's kind of what got them in hot water. But yeah, I actually addressed that before, and so I asked him during our conversation. I said, "Hey, have you've read Mary Schweitzer's research on the soft tissue?" He said, "No, I haven't. I don't really read that stuff."
Now there is where you get the glorious moment, and then you can play another card, because you can go, excuse me, but this is not 1880, this is 2018. The information directly is accessible to you. Instead of relying on a secondary source to tell you what supposedly the facts are, why don't you have the gumption to read the original material? So now you can do it directly. If you had done that, you would have discovered that your secondary source was misrepresenting her work. Then you've got him on another turf, because now he can't say, oh, well, I've read the original work, so I've tested out my secondary source. No, he's just admitted he didn't do that. So now he's got to defend his lack of sound scholarship. See how the source methods things work?
Indeed. Yeah, and I only managed to use that, I think, about twice. The other time
I was just right from the get-go when he mentioned the radiocarbon thing. That was a source methods question right off the bat. Yeah. He could never have gotten that from a primary source. He would have had to have glommed onto it, just like Kent Hovind did that stupid Archaeopteryx fraud. That's way dated. It's so dated that it's hard to even find the texts for it. Even your little Russian probe thing has trouble accessing some of that old archive, because that stuff is from the 1980s. And some of the stuff is literally not accessible online. All the original articles on the Archaeopteryx fraud are in a photography magazine, and they don't keep archives. So you can't access it online. And the only one you can get up is the science thing. So it's and then, since you can't get the primary sources easily, you can flip it to the other side, and that creationists have admittedly thrown in the towel on it. They don't doubt that it's a real fossil. Jonathan Sarfati and all the rest. So that puts Kent Hovind out on the other limb, that he's disputing even the opinions of fellow creationists without realizing it.
Oh, well, he does that quite a bit. I mean, that was kind of what drove the split between AIG and Kent Hovind was, he wouldn't stop using arguments like thermodynamics and things like that when they said, hey, these are bad arguments, stop using them. Yeah.
And that's another litmus test, because you can tell the moment little Matt Powell throwed up that damn expanding sun argument, I'm going, yes, you've got him by the balls, because that's an exclusively Kent Hovind claim, and it's an exclusively stupid one.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
So it was the Lord.
I had watching a bit of his videos. He does enjoy cosmology stuff, but since I know such little about cosmology, it was not a good place.
Cosmology gets used on both sides of the fence, because young Earth creationists have to. They've got to dispose somehow of the great big universe that's really, 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 really old. And all of that. But then on the other side, you get the intelligent design groupies that just are embracing all of the anthropic arguments that are knee-deep in the standard physics. So they can't dispute the technical cosmology. So now they've got to go the Uras route, which is somehow or other they got to make the Old Testament consistent with a singularity billions of years ago. And boy, it's weird to think. And I poke at Uras every once in a while on that. I'm still trying to find out his damn technical paper on the Earth's transparent, murky atmosphere early on, which I know he's never going to be able to find.
I can't help it. Every time the name Hugh Ross comes up, I see a guy who is I think, really good at what he does in cosmology, and then saying that angels are a species, and Steve McRae agreeing with him on that. That's something
Yeah,
I'll
well,
never
there you
get out of
go.
my mind.
Ross is in many respects a fuddle brain, and he's very incestuous in turn. A very small bunch of people. There are only a tiny handful of people that post at Reasons to Believe. I mean, it's basically him and Fazal Rana and a nameless staff. There's practically no other ones in that, and they're largely peripheral. That if somebody is prone to a theological point of view on things in old Earth creationist time, they just as easily slide over almost into the biologos territory. Then they would have to worry about Ross. So he gets used very, very little. He's a little minor player. And I think the idea that he's not a major player on this, that there's the intelligent design gang and then the monster of young Earth creationism and Answers in Genesis that are the dominant group in there, and Kent Hovind, that those people get all of the fuss pot on it, must just drive him up the wall. Yeah.
And yeah, I was a little bit distracted, but yeah, it's something that I can't grasp. I can't get my head around this, that a guy who obviously knows at least a good part of the science can then throw in something that ridiculous.
Oh, but it's easy. They're Tortukans. Once you understand the nature of the Tortukan mind, that they have objects of desire that they want to be true, and with a drop of a hat, they can suddenly latch onto them. Because the Bible refers to angels. The Bible refers to demons. Jesus cast demons out of pigs, or puts them into pigs, and the like. It's all in the scripture. That must be true. That's not a metaphor. And so his obsessions about soulish animals, his argument that somehow or other, because he has Adam and Eve being kind of the standard 6,000 year frame-ish, because he's very vague on dates, but it sounds like most of the time he's arguing that Neanderthal, or the Homo, Cro-Magnon and all the rest, with the Lancel Chapeau and all the kinds of pictures and stuff that are done, that's actually done by non-soulish pre-humans, and that Adam and Eve are the first soulish people. And you're going, what? But he doesn't think a lot about that. He can just grasp at things when they're convenient, and he tends to repeat a lot of the arguments that he builds himself up as though he's done them before. There's an awful lot of daisy chain citation where he cites himself in these things, and so he's a terrible debater. He has a kind of a bland, like a chocolate eclair that's been left out in the sun a little too long. It's somewhat sticky and pedantic, and so anybody that's got a gift of gab can just wipe the floor with him. Kent Hovind's done that, and Dwayne Gish and all that are way more agile debaters than he is.
Crickets.
Crickets. And he has still not put my discussion up. He's never going to put my chat with him up, because he didn't get any info. He didn't get any help from it. He couldn't make any theological hay off of me. So, boop, I'm off the scope.
Okay. Okay, let's see. So we can also go back to, what did you say, Peter?
Well, I said it's a common response. If you provide people with good evidence, they will either run away or ignore it. That's the only two options they have.
And yeah, I don't think he can deal with me much. He's polite about it. I think he has there's something in his brain that says I'm not an idiot, so that he's got to tread very carefully with me. But he's also realizing that he's not getting any help for his arguments from me. So anyway, you were about to continue, Jackson.
Oh, yeah. So as far as his, and I think I've talked before on this channel about how he completely misunderstands gene flow. He thinks gene flow is just migration, which is kind of weird. It's like, what is the gene part in gene flow?
Although it can occur in that will cause some gene flow right there. Demons and avatars and all that.
Well,
so it's a cousin.
Well, he doesn't seem to think that if they migrate, they will breed and that will spread their genes. He seems to not really understand that part.
Yes, perhaps you and you know you can use some nice sarcasm on there in a discussion. When a mommy gene and a daddy gene feel very deeply about one another. I mean, this is sex, thank you. And so you can use a little as for a humor moment.
Right. Another thing. So yeah, he also quotes Darwin, the Darwin's definition of natural selection very frequently, even though I'm 95% sure he's never picked up a copy of Origin of Species, let alone read it. And then he says, if you disagree with Darwin and you're an evolutionist, you need to check your meds. It's like, excuse me, we've moved on since Darwin. You know, and so that's it. It seems it's very funny because it shows, I think, definitely that he does not have any clue how far the science has moved since Darwin. If he's making this claim that someone's crazy if they agree with evolution but disagree with Darwin on something, I'm sorry, Darwin was wrong about a few things, and there's nothing wrong with disagreeing with him because he lived 150 years ago.
Yeah.
So
well, I haven't watched everything Kent Hovind put out in his latest series of lies in the textbooks, but the parts that I did see, he's still referring to science anywhere between the early 1900s and the 1980s, as if that's still something that hasn't been disputed or revised since then. And
oh no. Anything discovered in 1925 is just as credible today as it was in 1925.
And all of that is actually revealing something about his source base, because very few of the modern creationist apologetics people are drawing off of stuff that far back. What you're looking at is he has been reading or studying people who are probably works from the 1980s and early branch creationism, probably pre-intelligent design. Even the intelligent designers don't pay that much attention to that stuff. And so he is siphoning stuff where there's authority quotes that have been drawing off of metastasized anti-evolution apologetics. The very dated nature of some of that stuff is one of the signs of, or using a quote mine, because that stuff, it pops up, older quotes get popped up routinely in those quote mine lists.
Yeah, well, I think there's also maybe a link to how religion works, because if it comes to religion, having older copies and having older documents, that'll help your case, and they're applying exactly the same. Yeah, they're applying the same method to science.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and for them, proof texting in the Bible is an all or nothing. If Isaiah says such and so, it's true for all time. And so if they have a proof text of some evolutionist saying such and so in 1925, that becomes a data blip that never changes. It never has any change of context, and they'll just use it like nobody's business. But the problem is, most of the people that are going to be trotting this crap out have never read the original material. And the older it is, the least likely they are. Like they've been ploying through 1920s books.
Or 1940s Romer.
Yeah.
Like
oh, yeah. Yeah. And so a lot of this stuff is the very dated nature of it. And that's why the more you know about the field of who cites what and what quotes get used by whom, the more you can get up to things. When I now have the point when one of the creationists lobbed, I think, Truth. I call him Truth because that's his short version. Truth as is what it is, or something like that. That's a long blip in his Twitter handle. Anyway, he quoted a Keelan Jaworska, 1992, page 190 reference that's disputing the reptile-mammal transition. And he cited that cute little thing. And I said, oh, wait a minute. Uh-oh, let me take a bet. So I opened up Slam Dunk and did the text search for that name. And there it was. It was from the AIG 2016 article that had cited that particular page number. And I had called attention to how they had misrepresented its contents and had neglected to note that they had discussed probanognathans as transitionals.
Yeah.
And he started backing off. So he immediately, he would never admit, and to this day, next couple of days, he has never said, oh, I've never read the original. He will refuse to say that. Instead, he says, well, you just copy stuff. All of your things are just copied. You're just taking stuff you copied. And I keep on saying, I read the original texts. You don't. Please tell us, did you bother to read the original paper? Yes or no? And he'll constantly avoid doing that because they know down in their little deep heart of hearts homunculus that to say, oh, I relied on a secondary source and I never read the original material, and it doesn't sound good. And I even put it into a Bible context. If somebody claimed to be quoting the Bible and they relied on a secondary source and that source had gotten the material wrong, would you find it okay? And he didn't answer on that either.
Yeah,
Duh.
it's always fun sparring with people on Twitter. I've actually had
well, they literally don't get the difference between a primary and a secondary source. For them, it's the proof texting out of their own mouths. And so they don't need to look up the original material, just like your little Powell guy.
Right. I've had a
since you mentioned Twitter, Jackson, I'd like to mention, I feel like being in the Twilight Zone. I'm in a conversation with James, but I'm in two different conversations on two different platforms.
Jim Sano?
No,
there's a couple Jameses on there.
No, I'm in the same conversation you are in right now on Twitter, because you just replied to a conversation that I was in.
Oh, so cute. Okay.
We're having two separate conversations at the very same time. With Jackson, and with the guy named Montlake Man.
Yeah, Jack Burton. Yeah, he's had a bunch of different iterations, and isn't there some plans to have me debating him sometime?
Yeah.
I won't hold my breath on that one either.
That's going to happen in a week or two. He's currently moving, so he doesn't have a lot of time, but. He has been keeping word with me every single time, so that'll work. And
he's not a conventional young Earth creationist. It would be fun to figure out what he actually does think and on which basis. He's kind of vague. I've got some notes about some of the stuff he puts up because I keep a little spreadsheet column of all my interactions with people online, and I put little notes in some cases, juicy quotes if they say something exceedingly stupid, and in some cases I put in the dates they say it so I can be more precise about it. But so I have a crib sheet for him. Yeah.
Speaking of quotes that are amazingly stupid, for anyone who doesn't know, I would like to share one of a bit of Orange's quotes that I love so much. I know I've told it to you, RJ.
But I have gold mine.
Yeah, but I have to share this quote with everyone because it is absolutely beautiful. And it goes like this, quote, "So what do fossils tell us about the history of life on Earth? Well, a century of paleontology since Darwin hasn't changed the picture much," close quote. So there you go, folks.
I haven't text searched that one. Have you tried to locate whether he's quoting somebody parasitically or whether that's his own original wording?
No, I have not tried to
give it a try on that. I mean, I've got umpteen different things on my sleeve to be able to not bother, but try Googling that text full length and see if any shows up anywhere to find out whether or not they're because I've done that periodically. That's how I found out that he was stealing from Harinyaya, because the specific wording. Hello, Cy, Mr. Pug.
Hello.
Oh, hello. We have another voice.
How is it?
Hi.
This fine evening.
Do you know that there's the Captain Obvious commercial there where they're playing a bunch of pugs as an instrument, slapping their little tummies? Have you seen that commercial?
Yes, pug bongos. I did in fact see it. Apparently, YouTube's not real hot with the notifications. I just got home and got the notification. The topic, this a bit of orange. Is that Christian comedy thing, or what? Am I thinking of the wrong thing? From the
yes, you are correct.
Christian comedy.
Central Christian comedy. There's actually one of the links that came up when I typed in the quote, RJ, was Evolution News.
Okay. Discovery Institute. Yeah. So that gives you a sense of who's it was just listed as Evolution News, or one of the. Oh, does it have an author name? And what year was it?
Dennis O'Leary, 2015. Stasis.
Denise O'Leary. Oh, yay, Denise O'Leary. Oh, yes, the Canadian intelligent design person who is addicted to secondary sources.
It doesn't seem like the quote itself isn't in there, but that was the first thing that came up when I typed in the quote. So he might have kind of synthesized it from what was said in there. The title is Stasis, Life Goes On, but Evolution Does Not Happen. And humorously, Orange actually mentions stasis a few times because he, as per usual with creationists, does not understand stasis at all. And so,
no, that's... Oh, yeah, one of the that creationist that I was jousting with on First Things made the mistake of pointing out the punctuated equilibrium, and I said, oh, gosh, I've surveyed all anti-evolutionists on that subject. Every one of them gets it wrong. So, and I put the link up to all that. So Jack Burton, Peter and I, yes, that's the exchange I was bringing up. He invoked David Berlinski, or at least Berlinski, didn't say David. And since I have communicated directly with Berlinski, I bet I'm the only one in the exchange that has. I know a little more about this matter than that. I know just what he's written on and what he hasn't. He knows diddly squat about the macroevolution issue, and he's 900 miles away from the technical papers. What's on the show tonight, Si?
Oh, well, actually, I'm thinking of throwing the whole menu out based on listening to what you guys are talking about.
oh no!
Did you catch my dissection of Kent Hovind?
What, tonight here?
My evolution hour Wednesday.
Yeah.
A lot. I've been every Wednesday. I have missed the opportunity to join you in those.
Well, I flat out say he's a liar.
Well, yes.
And document
So
exactly.
you may not have realized this yet, but Kent Hovind is not always truthful about everything.
Yeah, well, no, he believes everything he says is the truth. I don't for a moment accuse him of mendacity. I just accuse him of parasitical stupidity because he is so lazy that he literally can't find out that the stuff he says that are lies are in fact lies. And he did a trifecta of nicking from Harun, for page after page after page, and clearly doing a cold read because he would hit words that he didn't understand. He would go, whatever that is. He obviously literally had never read the PowerPoints of his own PowerPoints until the very night. And then he repeats the old Archaeopteryx is a fraud claim that is so pathetic. It was debunked decades ago, and creationists accept that it was debunked. Jonathan Sarfati and Conservapedia, they all agree that it was not debunked, that it was these are legitimate fossils. But old Kent hasn't got the memo on this in 2018.
You said Kent when you mentioned it, and I was thinking, you said Kent, but I was thinking Eric for some reason. And
Eric is a pile of fluff.
Hovind the Younger.
Yes. Now that is one. That's why. First off, I couldn't remember this week you talking about Eric Hovind at all, so I was somewhat baffled. That is now cleared up. But now, yes, Hovind the Elder. I'm willing to accept. Not well. I always accept your analysis. I accept your analysis that Hovind the Elder is in fact being truthful to the best of his knowledge.
Yeah, to the best of his lazy ass knowledge. Now, Eric is just a secondary smiley face. He doesn't really make primary arguments. He doesn't even copy primary arguments. He just brings guests on who says things and he nods, and then his little assistants will be nodding, and that's pretty much the extent of it.
You know, Si, do you remember Fragments of Truth?
Fragments of Truth.
The movie that came out a few months ago. It was on we know the Bible hasn't changed in 2,000 years, whatever.
Yeah,
sure. Right. Yeah.
I didn't go to everyone, Hill and you, and you said we seemed that thrilled about it, so I said, I'm not going to go. The two of you.
Yeah, Savannah and I weren't going to go first because I actually had finals, and so I was like, I should probably study.
Priorities.
And then I was like, well, I've been studying all day and all yesterday. oh, I want to go see this movie. And so Savannah and I went and we saw it. And it was like all Christian movies. It went on for an hour longer than it probably should have.
Yeah, for information content, it could have been edited down to 5 minutes.
You know, yeah, one of the funny things about it was they actually, so they did the whole movie and they actually had was it John Rhys Davies? The guy who was
the played the Gimli in the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, he was the narrator, and so what was very funny about it was they spend the whole movie talking about how it hasn't changed, or at least their arguments that it hasn't changed, and so they have an after movie kind of like they had actually shown this movie somewhere and they were answering questions about it, and they said, "All right, isn't that great? It shows how reliable the Bible is." And it's like, wait a minute. There's been a subtle shift here. We went from look at how it hasn't changed to look at how reliable it is.
Well, it has to be reliable.
Yeah, which is not at all the same thing.
Look at science. You can't.
All the Book of Mormon is consistent.
Every couple of years, science changes. How can you trust that, Jackson?
But they also made a funny little. They said one funny thing in there. That really raised my eyebrows was that the carbon dating is good to use, don't you know? Because we can cross date these texts by carbon dating and also with the language used in the text. And so since Eric Hovind had tweeted about it, I tweeted Hovind. I said, "Is carbon dating okay to use now? Now that this movie said it is?"
Yeah, and what I would suspect then is that religious apologetics comes from that nice, acceptable old Earth creationist framework where they're not challenging radiometric dating. But that's actually one of the little taffy pulls going on, because an awful lot of the things for settling what's going on in the last few thousand years of history is because we can directly radiocarbon date it. And anything by definition after 4,400 years ago, 2450 BC, should theoretically be radiocarbon datable even in a young Earth creationist framework.
Yeah, I think it's very funny how this, this movie, which the young Earth creationists were talking about, can be used against them because they hate carbon dating. It's not good for anything, right? But evidently now it is, and we even have a method of cross-checking the dates that we get, even though we already had that.
That is called the double standard. You always want to, when your opponents are engaging in a double standard, you definitely want to call attention to it, because that's one of the things where you can just tie them up in knots as to, excuse me, why do you use this on this thing, but then you don't do it over there?
Yeah. Oh, I completely forgotten about the index, or not the index fossils, the stasis things, because Orange loves his examples of stasis, and he brought up two examples. So there you go. That makes 3 examples in total that are used in his 21 video series.
Ooh, and which ones are these? He waited to ask with bated breath.
Coelacanths and horseshoe crabs.
Ooh, wow. Gosh, I haven't seen those little puppies before. What a fresh option. And both of those are, for one thing, neither one of which are the same species or genera as the ancient version. So it's not as though they're completely static. And does that mean that all of the non-static animals that have been living over the last billion years don't count? Oh, by the way, did any of you see on the Twitter, I put a link up on it earlier, I think, or no, my gosh, I haven't. Oh, idiot. I'll have to put that up. A brand new paper in Science Advances about a Precambrian bilaterian.
I just saw that today.
That suggest a little bilateral appendages.
I just saw that.
Yeah, I got the blurb on it.
I completely forgot to do that. I saw it earlier before I went out to work.
Well, I still have it. It's in my bibliography thing. I got a little note for it, and I'll have to put it up on Twitter and all that. But I have my word processor shut down because I'll be getting involved with video and all that here, and following the lessons of Peter, closing off a lot of the little things down on the bottom so that it doesn't hog up memory. But anyway, yeah, I got that in there because I thought, ooh. I just looked through. There were a whole bunch of neat little papers there in Science Advances, and it'll be more information for the intelligent design people to avoid.
It's funny. It's really very, very good timing because I just made a video on the Cambrian part one of two parts of looking at the quote Cambrian explosion and how it really wasn't as explosive as people think it is.
Yeah.
You know,
It's only about why there was such a flurry of arthropods. That's the
pretty
interesting
much.
question. Because everything else is relatively slow as molasses. You've got the chordates are kind of developing kind of mousily over in the corner, but all of these buggy things are running amok. And
Right.
and why that's the case, the arthropods part store, as one paleontologist referred to it, is an interesting thing, and it's probably partly ecological. It's partly because they're the first kids off the block, and a lot of them fail after a while. It's probably telling you a lot. That even Gould noted that they seem to be very disparate but not diverse. In other words, you have relatively few species of a wide-ranging group of different ways of assembling the part store.
I actually found an article, a scientific article, talking about how the radiation of organisms in the Ordovician actually was larger than the radiation of organisms in the Cambrian. Like the
Oh
number
yeah,
of,
weren't they hitting the land at that time?
a few groups, yeah.
Yeah, and so
early
they now got a new
plants and
habitat, and that's
yeah,
going gangbusters.
early
And they've got,
plants, arthropods, things like that.
yeah, and that produces a busy little beaver. In fact, the plants went hog wild, and ultimately produced some mass extinction things because they would be changing the way this thing cycled and causing ice ages, burps to go on, and it's an exciting little world that they were. The designer theme park version of the past doesn't always square with the data, and it looks like the things are doing their thing naturally, and then they can fall down, go boom.
Yeah. Heard of the Mistaken Point fossil bed? Yes, I have heard of it. I came across it in my research on the Precambrian stuff. I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I came across that term. With regard to the stasis and his examples, what I have written down in my notes was to explain, first of all, that we can't really test the genetics of these organisms that lived 450 million years ago, like the coelacanths, for instance. We have no idea what their genetics look like and how it would differ, even though it probably would differ vastly from today. But also, we actually have discovered a number of little guys kind of at the base of the coelacanth tree, a whole bunch of little kind of stem coelacanths. And so you see the early Sarcopterygians like Giyu and Mimania and those other guys.
Yeah, and they're not that stasis-y. You can
Right.
tell them apart by sight. You can go, oh, that looks coelacanth-ish, but it's clearly not the same as the coelacanth
Right.
that we
And
know.
then you've got this little group called the Onychodonts, like King Minotus, which was discovered fairly recently. I think I saw a paper on it, or I think there was a paper on it in Science fairly recently. And so that was a stem coelacanth, so it's kind of coelacanth-like, but not quite there yet. And then, of course, you get into Rebelatrix and Mawsonian and those other guys, which are the true coelacanths. And so what you see is this slow progression from non-coelacanths to kind of coelacanths to the true coelacanths.
And one group survived, of which they're highly generalist. They live in a deep sea environment. They eat just about anything. There's no selection pressure to alter. They're doing they're a good old-fashioned Model T Ford thing that works quite nice. It's like hammers. Do you know how static hammers look? Like, hammers, there's just, there's not a hell of a lot you can do with a hammer to improve on it. And so it works well, and, you can decorate it in a variety of twiddly ways, but that's about it. And of course, if hammers reproduced, there would be a selection pressure for hammer shape if that's what it does as a hammer, because that's the hammer shape.
Right. Clade Starfish said coelacanthi. You know what I mean.
Ooh. Yeah. Then the other factor is that if you look at all of the life that's gone on in that same range, stasis is not a good description for it.
Right.
It's anything but static. It's changing.
Right.
The coelacanths and the horseshoe crabs are really exceptions. And the fact that they have so few examples of these things, even the crocodile people have been pissed off at people referring to crocodiles as living fossils, because they say, excuse me, here's the paleontology. They aren't living fossils at all.
Yeah, the modern crocodiles are part of a group called a Neosuchia, which appeared in the Jurassic, I think. And so, prior to that, you had the Rawasuchians and Adasaurs, and then the Cenozoic, you had the running crocodiles. You had just all sorts of.
Yeah, the Lagasuchids. I love the old Lagasuchids, rabbit crocs.
Totally aquatic crocodiles.
The idiot on First Things tried to pass off that, well, we have the same information as you do, and I immediately disabused him of that. And then he says, well, you just connect the dots because of your evolutionary assumption. And I says, well, you're never likely to connect the dots for two reasons. One is you don't allow the dots ever to connect, and two, you ignore most of the dots.
Ouch.
Yeah, I won't let him have the last word.
Oh yeah, Piggles says Simosuchus, the plant-eating crocodile. Yeah, the Adasaurs were like that too, except they were in the Triassic. They were these group of weird armored plant-eating crocodiles.
The aquatic ones. The fact that it's pretty well agreed upon by the paleontology that the creationists don't notice is that modern crocodiles are one of these degenerate versions, that their metabolism is not as active as their ancestors were. They kind of hunker down into a nice little niche mode because there's relatively few examples of them now, and they're really successful. They're very good at their job, and all their more active cousins have all gone extinct. But in the old days, they had a functionally warm-blooded-ish metabolism. They had almost a fully operational four-chambered heart that was developed independently of the ones that are occurring over in mammals and birds. And they were a diverse bunch. But there's a danger, a risk in being apex predators, in being too interlocked with a network of predator-prey things, because if it collapses, it may take you with it. And that's why there are no saber-tooths anymore.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I'd totally forgotten. With regard to the coelacanths, I'd actually found a paper recently that talks about a unique coelacanth. Even though I would guess you could argue all coelacanths are unique, but this was one thing I found. It was on a coelacanth called a Phareia. The paper is titled "Heterochronic Evolution Explains Novel Body Shape in a Triassic Coelacanth from Switzerland."
Ooh.
So,
okay. I'm going to have to bite the bullet here and open up my references to make sure that or either that or just what's the title? What's the lead author's name?
Oh heck, if I know, I can throw it in.
Okay, but the title is heterochrony or heterochronic.
Heterochronic Evolution. The author is L. Cavin.
Cavin.
Yes.
Okay, I'll find it on
Lionel Cavin. Yeah.
Lionel Cavin. Okay, I'll check up on that, because if I don't have my bibliography, I'll want to add it.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but I have to leave. I have to have a quick conversation with someone in Australia, and then
you're flying all the way to Australia.
Make sure that I'm in time for I don't know. This thing.
Right.
You're doing a Groucho Marx there, where you come in and says, "Hello, I must be going."
Yes.
Yes. I should close this down soon, because Sai is going to have a movie night very shortly.
Yeah, well, it's just I usually pop into that at like the last minute. Normally, I would be still working on stuff, but I've shut most everything down except for this and Twitter.
Right.
And then I'll move over to it, because I realized, no, I'm not going to be able to get into that stack of 2008 PNAS papers that I had to process there. I'm not going to get around to that. And I still want to research that.
So I need to go. I know, James. It's going to take a little to get you to just wait a minute, but I really need to go. I just wanted to pitch one question to Sai. Can we do a Harun Yahya sometime? I mean, only the visuals will draw you a lot of attention to movie night.
He doesn't do a lot of videos, actually, does he? Well, he does a lot of books.
If someone
and live lectures.
If someone can find one, I'm perfectly willing.
Yeah, I don't think he does conventional videos. He does a
Oh, he
pile
does.
up
He does.
of
He
books
does.
and posting. Oh, if he does, then find one. Yeah, find a juicy one.
Yeah. Okay. So juicy, as in
Really
Playboy
stupid.
juicy, or in science.
No,
juicy?
as in stupid juicy.
Yeah,
Anything that's anything on any subject matter. It'll ultimately be. He has a wide range of palette. He's got a weird kind of conspiracy thinking version of thing. There's a anti-Semitism streaks to his stuff. There's a bunch of odd sidelight. He's kind of the Donald Trump of Turkish creationism.
There's a lot to address, but I really have to go, guys.
All right, Peter.
Bye.
We'll see you later.
Catch you later.
All right,
Okay.
bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Jackson, don't pressure yourself based on movie night. If you wish to
I was
have more educating of people to do, including myself, by the way.
Well, it's only 8:23. We got we can all mosey on over to Size Channel. About 8:45 or so. So we still got plenty of time.
RJ, I think since you live in obviously the past, the correct time is 10:23. I don't deal with time travelers here.
Yes. I'm all the way back at 8:23 in the evening here in Spokane.
It's 11:23, and that's
it's almost yes. Does the pug turn into a pumpkin at midnight?
It's sort of pumpkin shaped to begin with.
Yeah, it's a cute little pug.
I have to go get things set up and ready for the later foolish.
Okay, well we'll be there and we'll be drinking something.
Indeed. All right. Thank you, Jackson, for having me. And
thanks for coming on. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
All right, and so as you can see, a bit of orange and Kent Hovind and Matt Powell all have no idea what they're talking about. That is the central theme of tonight. Take that with you. Go with grace. Fun fact, speaking of grace, I got handed a little thing at work today. A guy said, "Here you go, something to read," and it said like, "Jesus is looking out for you," that kind of stuff. So I thought that was a little funny.
How thoughtful. Yes. Like the ones that says, "Have you found Jesus?" And you say, "Is he lost?"
He can't find our hearts or something. I don't know.
But, something like that. Yes. Well, remember, we all actually love the Lord, and we just refuse to admit it. That's kind of they're trying to declare what it is we think, and not allow us to actually think what we think. But that's another matter. Right. Yeah. That's well, I hope eventually your little orange guy actually will show up for a discussion.
Yeah, and, I've asked Shannon if it would be possible for him to talk with me, but he still hasn't dropped anything new in the month, which is weird because he does a lot of stuff. He has a blog and videos, and he has not dropped anything. And so this might be because, like I said, because he got sick, or whatever. But
illness, that must be inconvenient. I don't do that.
You don't do sick, RJ?
No, that's I've spent. Let me see. I think I had like the mumps back when I was like 4 or 5. I remember that. And once in a while, I might have the flu to where I think I lost in all of school, from grade school to college, maybe 3 or 4 days of school, all told. And then the first time I actually was in the hospital was when I dropped a plate on my foot, metal plate that broke some bones. And I had to go into the hospital very briefly for a thing to be done for surgery. Ooh. And then it turned out I actually had super clotty blood. And so as I thought I was totally recovered, that's when actually I spent a couple days in the hospital. And so that was like 2004 or so. So yeah, I am not, they would ask me, "Are you allergic to anything?" And I go, "I don't know. I don't get ill, so I don't have any experience with medicine. So I don't really know if I'm allergic to anything."
Right.
Yeah, well, so I'm from another world than other people do. They have much more fragile health and issues and stuff. I'm largely impervious to bacteria and flu viruses and all that stuff. I think it's because I talk them to death.
RJ, it was very funny. I actually found a paper. Actually, well, you certainly saw it because you proofed my chapter. The one on the monitoring lactation proteins.
Yeah, yeah.
They're antibacterial. I thought that was very neat.
Yeah, I put that in the bibliography. I would be adding that into a future slam dunk if and when I can ever get a real live publisher. Then for let's have a whole stack of stuff that would be add-on material to bring it up to speed.
Yeah, it was oh, it's Charis. Hey, Charis, do you want to get in here?
Hi, Charis.
I don't know if we're gonna go on too much longer. We probably shouldn't because of his thing of size.
Well, let's just say, as a general principle to everyone watching, adopt the source methods approach.
Yes.
Which is plain out and simple. Yes, you know what the philosophy is and you have a viewpoint on the world. Yes, you are familiar with the data field as much as possible because you're genuinely curious about it. Pick areas that you really love and so you can be knee-deep knowledge on them. And then you want to also challenge the source base of your opponents. Not only be able to defend what sources you've relied on and how you're so sure that they're reasonable and legit, but also challenge them for their sources because they probably have never really challenged them. They've not looked them up. They've not cross-checked them. They've just decided, well, it said what I want to be true. It's true.
That's kind of how I felt with the guy who's been spamming my videos, the White Wolf, today, because he made a comment about how Piltdown Man was constructed from a pig's tooth. It's Charis. Hey, Charis.
Yeah, they muddled Nebraska Man and Piltdown.
Yeah, and I saw that, and I was like, you have very obviously never read anything on the subject.
No, and you can see literally the roots of it because I made note of it even in the old tip that it's almost invariably the case that if somebody brings up Piltdown, they're going to mention Nebraska Man.
Oh yeah, Charis, how are you today?
I'm okay. I think I'm coming down with something, so it was kind of interesting that you were on that subject as I was coming into chat.
Because we are all connected psychically.
Yes, I mean, my crystal balls aren't for nothing.
I actually saw you and Peter were in a conversation with Glenn from Texas.
Yes.
That sounds like a guy who could be on a State Farm commercial. Glenn from Texas.
Glenn from Texas. Yes, come on down. Yes, he also or sells used cars.
Yeah.
He was a decent guy, though.
Yeah.
He wasn't like some of the guests we've had. I won't mention any names.
Some guests, RJ. No.
Oh.
No. Yeah.
I'm just about to attack Kent Hovind again. On Twitter, he is talking about another of his lies of textbooks things, and I'm going to say, "Ooh, gosh, is that as incompetently documented as your other stuff?"
Oh, RJ, I want to point out, Clade Starfish says, "Sad we even need a special name for basic research methodology." What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's just basically research. That's what really, I was so amused when that poor little Matt Powell guy said he does research. And I go, no, he doesn't.
Well, he does. Well, see, because he claimed to read secular sources, but then when you press him on literally any secular sources, he buckles.
Well, so, I mean, somebody from that worldview is going to treat the word read a little bit differently than, say, you would.
I like that they treat the word read different. I think I might use that in the future. We must treat the word read differently.
Yes, it depends on what read means. You know, you read and read.
What is it? What does it? What do you mean by is?
Yes,
Right?
yes. In lieu of Mr. Clinton, who's in the current thing. But yeah, what you're seeing in source methods is a really fundamentally different way of looking at the world between people who get what source methods means and the vast majority of people who don't, because it's not a natural thing to do. The idea that you're always skeptical about your source base and you're trying to determine, is this legitimate? Just because it's written down, even by a regular solid publisher, doesn't necessarily mean it's an oracle. And so you're trying to measure out how reliable they are. And even somebody who can be generally accurate can have their head up their ass on some particular point. So you always got to keep yourself agile and test it against what the data are. So that means you're diving down into data field. There's a lot of stuff on Bible apologetics, for example, that drives me nuts, because there'll be issues that pop up when they're talking about some inscription or monument or some such thing, and I'm looking around and all I'm finding online are damn websites that discuss it. I want a technical paper in an archaeology journal. That means that serious people referring to something that's floating around in the blogosphere thing or was in some press release. No, if it hasn't vetted to where somebody has now done a scholarly article describing it with a rigorous manner, that's something that it doesn't mean it's a fiction, but it means you put question marks and check on that later and don't jump off the gangplank with it until you have.
But RJ, you're viewing this with a darkened heart.
Yes, I have. My heart is eclipsed with that terrible obsession with reading sources and wanting to get it right.
May the scales fall from your eyes and you see the light.
Yes. Turn the page, sweet Jesus, and check the damn footnote at the bottom.
Anyways, people, it's just past 10:30 now, incorrect time. And so our Sci-Strike's about to start his thing, and so check his stuff out.
You're kicking us out.
So, well, I'm kicking the viewers out at the very least, and so everybody, thanks for coming.
He's pulling us over. We're just going over.
So thanks everybody for coming. I'll see you guys later. Use sound methods and other things. Spade and neuter your
Don't
pets.
accept any wooden penguins.
All right. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.